So good afternoon. Today is February 28th, and I'll call this meeting of the CC Power Board of Directors to order at 1 p.m. And I'll just confirm with our general counsel, it appears we have a quorum. Is that correct?
There is a quorum present, yes.
Thank you. So no matters were brought to me subsequent to posting the agenda. So the first item, and I'll give it a few seconds to let any attendees enter the meeting, is just to check in and see if there's any public comment on matters that were not listed on today's agenda. Giving it a few seconds here. Okay. So let's move to the consent calendar. It looks like we just have one item to approve the minutes from January 17. And is there any motion for that item? And I'll check for comment after that.
Move approval.
Okay. Any discussion? So that was 3CE with the motion, and I actually missed the second. Did we get it? Okay, Silicon Valley. All right, thank you. And let's check for public comment on the consent calendar, the minutes from January 17. Anyone wishing to speak on that? Not seeing anything there, so let's call the roll for the consent calendar.
For the consent agenda, Ava Community Energy absent, Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF. I'll try that again. So Clean Power SF for the consent agenda. I will jump back to that. Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
and Clean Power SF. Would you like to vote on the consent agenda?
Yes and yes.
Perfect. The consent agenda is adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was a double question, wasn't it? So let's go on to the regular calendar. And Ms. Isles, would you like to give the report out from the January 17 closed session?
Yes, I can report that there was no reportable action taken during the closed session.
Thank you. And let's see. That's not a comment item, I think. That's just a report out. So let's get started with the Getting It Built Right ad hoc committee report out. So that's item 6B. And I think General Manager Morris, I think I should probably kick this off and turn to the ad hoc, and then feel free to jump in as appropriate and kind of add to that report out. This is, for today's agenda, this is discussion, but our hope is to share a framework with you today and then bring it back for a vote in the next meeting. So we're definitely looking for resolution in the near term to make some progress. And I think I wanted to begin the report for the ad hoc by just commenting that I think we have an interesting puzzle to solve. CC Power serves to facilitate joint procurement, but doesn't procure on behalf of any member that doesn't wish to participate. And nevertheless, I think it's pretty obvious that we've seen how it's certainly more convenient and potentially more effective for labor and environmental justice organizations to talk with CC Power than it is to speak to each of our boards individually. It's a lot more work, obviously, to do that. And so over the past 2+ years, we've been navigating a question of how to improve on existing utility industry practices for power procurement. And one of the early concerns that was shared with us was that there seemed to be a risk that CC Power could become a vehicle for individual CCAs to procure to a lower standard than their governing board's adopted policies. And separately, some of the members raised concerns about unelected staff driving policies when we all have elected boards who are at least primary policymaking bodies. And a couple of our member agency boards recently exercised that authority by adopting procurement policies over the past year as well. So that's some of the context. And I'm seeing in the attendees some of the public participants today who contributed to a really excellent workshop in San Jose last November to explore this issue. And I want to thank them again for contributing their time and their experiences. And at that workshop, we talked about how CCAs might help California improve on its current, in my view, somewhat mediocre track record with phasing out our most harmful power sources and replacing them with less harmful sources. And an example of that is that I've come to believe that the state's recent decision to delay the closure of 3 once-through cooling plants was necessary for grid reliability, but I also feel it's symptomatic of a larger problem. And I'm just clicking on all these pop-ups saying my connection is unstable. Is audio still good? Okay, all right, thank you. I'm in a hotel. And I think that larger problem, at least in my view, and I'll speak for myself here, includes at least long delays in the CAISO queue and a growing lack of adequate transmission capacity to connect all these new clean power resources that we need. And particularly for the critical reliability resources like geothermal and long duration storage that CC Power members have procured through CC Power. And just to remind folks, if anybody's looking for the notes from that workshop or hasn't seen them, they're still posted on CC Power's website at cacommunitypower.org/events. And you can also just navigate there by going to the main website and clicking on events. And so CC Power formed an ad hoc committee to take all the community input and try to thread this needle to find ways to improve timelines for California to build transmission, to enable the energy transition, while also doing all of this work right, respecting workers, communities, the environment, and ratepayers. And so, easy puzzle to solve, right? We've come back with 4 recommended agreements that we'd like this board to consider approving next month. And I think there's a slide with these to share if you wish, although we can also just talk through them. I'll start talking, and if somebody wants to put it up on screen, they can. The 4 agreements are also in the packet, but it begins with something quite basic, and it's actually the second slide. The first was sort of a quick summary of everything I just said. So if you go to the second slide there, yeah. So I think this first point is really trying to get at the very first concern that was raised. And again, this hasn't been repeated recently, so maybe it's not a current concern, but I think it's still fair that each of CC Power's members, in the view of the ad hoc, probably ought to abide by their governing board members' policies when engaging in any joint action. And that ought to be made explicit. I think we took that as implicit before, but really expressly state that we cannot be a conduit for circumventing locally adopted policies through a democratic process. And maybe to this point, to the members who've adopted policies, their governing boards, I'm imagining, and I won't speak for them, but I'm just guessing their boards would not want this body to change their procurement policies at this point. The second one is that CC Power would agree to distribute procurement policies and practices in an ongoing manner to our members, and sharing that kind of information and resources. And so to the extent that organizations want a central voice and way to communicate, we would help them disseminate that kind of information. The third is that CC Power members would individually agree to regularly review model practices and policies and consider whether recommending updates to their own governing policies are appropriate, and bring those matters to their board when they deem it useful. And the fourth is that CC Power would agree to host a centralized resource. And there's an analogy here. CalCCA, the State Trade Association, has a centralized resource for a lot of information that folks at the PUC find helpful. And what we might consider with this is having a centralized web page at CC Power's website that has integrated resource plans, procurement policies, things like that, that make it convenient for statewide folks to find all of our information. And so I want to pause. That was a long intro, and I just want to check with the ad hoc members first and just see if Directors Mitchell or Balachandran want to fill any gaps that I've left.
If I may,
Go ahead. Yeah.
Chair Cyphers, I thought you covered pretty much everything we talked about. Maybe I'll just add one more thing that we took into account was our role as CCAs. We are subject to compliance obligations as a load-serving entity, whereas CC Power is not a load-serving entity and does not have any compliance obligations. So that was part of the background also in trying to come up with that balancing of how we can achieve these overarching goals.
Thank you. And Director Mitchell, is there anything I missed? Do you want to add?
I don't know. I think you both summarized it very well.
Okay, well, let's open it up to the board first, and then I also see some attendees who may want to speak to this too. So let's start with the board. What kinds of input would be helpful at this point? Hopefully there's some general consensus. We ought to agree to something within a month or so. I'm hoping, but if you disagree with that as well, let us know. Any hands want to start? Director Sears.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and to the ad hoc committee. I think that this is an exercise that I think has a lot of value for us as an organization, sort of fledgling organization, to set ground rules. We heard a lot of the feedback and input at the meeting in San Jose, which I think is accurately reflected in the proposal that's in front of us. To me, it strikes a good balance, recognizing what we do as individual organizations that then roll up into CC Power. So I would appreciate the work that's gone into this, and I do support taking action on this within the next month or two.
Thanks for that input. Let's see. How about Director Shaw?
Thank you, Chair Cyphers. I think, to the point that Girish had made about balancing various interests, I think this is a very good point. I think it's important to keep that in mind. And then, Chair, I think you had raised the issue around the role of CC Power, which is an important one as well. CC Power is a conduit for trying to achieve our procurement needs, and it's not a policy-making body and shouldn't operate as a policy-making body, but importantly, not as a policy or an operating body that would make it difficult to adhere to our own internal procurement policies. That's a point that you made very well. Of the 4 goals, I think I support all of those, or the 4 measures, all of those measures. This may be a question for General Manager Morris, but to the extent that our boards have taken action around this, it would be important to be able to evaluate projects and our participation in projects and advise our boards how those projects fit within the criteria for 3CE that our board had passed. And I know, General Manager Morris, we've shared our project selection methodology with you. And in the past, our RFOs had asked questions that would allow us to evaluate projects under that methodology. And is that still the intention, that you would ask those questions around, you've got 10 members here that may have different needs in order to do that, but that you would help facilitate the need to evaluate projects and our participation in them under our own internal policies?
Do you want to go ahead, General Manager Morris?
Well, I think it makes sense if you on the ad hoc committee kind of share your thinking first,
Sure.
and then I can
Sure.
how we implement. Thank you.
I think that that question came up in our discussions, and I think my expectation would be that all the criteria would be laid out by the participating members up front. And then if it appeared that there were conflicts, that they would be resolved before any procurement activities took place, so that it was an efficient process where members could then elect to come or go as appropriate. So if one member's policy was viewed as unworkable by the other 6, say, in a participating solicitation, then that member could either go back to its board and ask for an exemption, or could step out of the process, for example. So that's my working understanding. If that needed to be formalized in some way, that's another step that I haven't considered. But I think that's what we've done so far.
Mm.
And so I think it's a good norm practice at this point.
Director Shaw, if I can just quickly add, as you know, we have 4 projects under contract with different constituents in each project. And in our language, it's not until we get into the phase 2 that we know who is participating. And so it's really inside the project itself that we're in a better position to know whose policies we're seeking to comply with and what they are. And up in advance of that, it's a little challenging because we really, the very nature of CC Power is to, we don't know who's going to participate. We're never tasked with doing anything until members choose to opt in. But I see what you're saying, though, how it'll be important to make sure there's iteration there and clarifying how the phase 2 structure is fitting or not with members' policies.
No, I appreciate that. And I think you're right. That is the process we've been using, and I think that works. We may need to think about just information gathering and making sure there's an ability to gather information, because I think that's the crux more is, having the information to appropriately evaluate it under at least my own selection criteria.
On my part, I think that's some information we can gear up to track and try to come up with a methodology to implement such a thing.
Thank you. And I think Director Hale put her hand down for the moment. So I'm going to go to Director Marshall, and if I'm wrong about that, put your hand back up. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I think that the guiding principles make sense. Just to follow up on Director Shaw's comments, it would be interesting, and I don't know, Alex, if your team has already done this, understanding that there are exactly 2 staff people. I'm imagining that when you look across all of the member agencies here, that there are some elements of our policies that are common. Not all, certainly, but it would be interesting to know, like, where do we have that crossover? And it's almost like I'm thinking in my mind like about a matrix, so that when these policies come through, it's almost like a checkbox. Where do we match? And then where are there differences? In which case, then we have to go back to our individual policies and such. But that might be an interesting exercise if there's time and bandwidth to kind of get to that next level of analysis. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else before we go hear the public? Let's see. That Director Hale.
I guess having just seen this the first time now, I'm not really prepared to say what I think about it, other than I appreciate the work that's been done. Director Shaw asked my questions about how would this actually get implemented, which is why I took my hand down. But I do appreciate the work that's been done so far, and I'm anxious to hear if this is, I'm feeling responsive to the community that brought it to our attention in the first place.
This might be a good time to turn to the public and just because I'm already seeing a hand up, and I certainly want to do that before we go in too deep. So let me go to Catalyze. Might the SV stand for Silicon Valley? Let's turn to Catalyze SV.
Hi Hi, everyone. Rocio here. I am the interim deputy director of Catalyze SV. And yes, we are in Silicon Valley, so we're based in San Jose. We are a nonprofit organization that creates community engagement opportunities for members to participate in conversations about local development. We're really excited to see that San Jose Clean Energy is part of this coalition. And is part of these conversations about how to share opportunities more widely and ensure that infrastructure is being developed with community needs in mind. I'm here to learn about what's going on within the network. We currently are taking a close look at the electrification needs in the South Bay. There are some infrastructure challenges that have come across, our attention from community members and partners. So we, in this case, are taking a look at what's working. What are some of the really cool innovations and things that, partners, developers, local governments are doing to support wide range electrification, particularly around affordable housing development and public transportation needs. Those are two of our really big focuses. So we, in the next year, are looking to highlight, updates to Caltrain, for example, for electrification, but continuing to have a conversation with community members about what are the challenges to more local electrification opportunities. So that might be cost in some cases, might be infrastructure challenges in other cases. So we see ourselves as a middleman between community members and decision makers, agencies, and developers. So definitely want to get familiar with the work that you all do, but also highlight the need for access to community-based organizations like ourselves into your procurement process. We'd love to participate potentially as outreach or community engagement support for all of you so that community members can be part of these conversations and can be part of your needs assessments, for example, or whatever that may be as you kind of plan out the next steps of this process. So we're here, we're listening, and I'm happy to connect with you if you have any follow-up questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I will next turn to Eric Vian.
CCC Power Board, this is Eric Viam. I am the coordinator for the CCA Workforce and Environmental Justice Standards Alliance. I appreciate staff's efforts in bringing forward these draft agreements. Consistent with what Director Hale says, I need to bring these back to our alliance and discuss kind of what's what the implications of this proposal is, and we'll be you can expect us to be present in kind of greater numbers next month to be able to share with you and to do outreach with you ahead of time as well. Just a couple of things that I'll note is what I'm hearing in terms of the challenges of implementation for this and the direction that you're proposing here is that uniformity of policies across the CCAs would really address any of these issues around implementation. And so, we've had both excellent experiences and success working with a number of your members to adopt what we believe and what the CCAs that have adopted these strong policies believe are really thoughtful, comprehensive workforce and environmental justice procurement policies. And so, we are continuing to, initiate those conversations and appreciate the kind of open, supportive engagement that we've received. I will say that we do have limited capacity, and so some of you we haven't had a chance to reach out to yet. But if there's interest in engaging with us, we're happy to reach out. And if you're willing to send a message or a signal that you're open to engaging in these conversations with the Alliance, then we would welcome that as well. So yeah, I think the follow-up for us is to take this back to the Alliance and hopefully over the next month, it would be helpful for us to make contact together for those that haven't connected to talk about ways that we can work together to adopt uniform best practice policies across CCAs and CC Power to address these kind of concerns around implementation. So thanks again, GM Morris, for your work and the work of the ad hoc committee.
Thank you very much for those comments and for being a steady participant in our process. I don't see other hands raised, so I will check one more time for public comment. Okay, so I think what we're hearing is need some time to digest, but also some favorable reviews initially. But let's carry this into next month. And are folks okay with us continuing on to the next item at this point? Or was there anything burning that people missed saying? All right. We will move on to the next item. And I got to bring up my sheets because I'm working off a small screen today. Okay. All right. This is the general manager's report. Okay, good. General Manager Morris.
Well, thanks, Chair Cyphers, and hello, everybody. Thanks for making time today for some quick updates on CC Power. So this is the GM report. I wanted to just share a bit of information with everybody so we're all synced up as we head into some planning and other activities. So with that, we'll share some slides. Later in the meeting, there will be some discussions also about how we're closing the loop and coming back to you for approval on some operating policies. And we'll give those details to you, but that'll be a separate board agenda item. So really quickly, let's jump into it with the Inflation Reduction Act. So when we last got together in early or mid-January, we started on, the board approved a phase 2A for the Inflation Reduction Act project. At the time, we had a not to exceed, and we didn't exactly know who was going to participate. It turns out we have all 9 members participating. So, it's pretty exciting that we're now moving forward to everyone. And just as a reminder, what the phase 2A is designed to do is to do a thorough activity in soliciting for both PPA toll projects and for build transfer agreement projects. That'll give us shortlist pricing and shortlist candidate projects. And then we'll come back to the board for consideration of a phase 2B, which would be, again, only for those who opt in. That would signal that they're interested in pursuing some of those projects through negotiation and final contracting. Just to give you a feel, so we've done phase 1, which is the origination and discussion section. Phase 2A is now underway. Philippe from our team is leading it, and just to give you a feel for some of it, and I'll give you a more detailed look in a moment. This really is just talking to the service providers, developing pro forma agreements, including for build transfers, that we hope can provide templates to all of the members in case this is something you want to do on your own. We're also doing bond due diligence, and this will help everybody think about if we do pursue a build transfer, what does that mean for your balance sheet? What's it look like to go into a debt issuance for this type of project? And then how will we shortlist? And so I wanted to let you know on the next slide, Amy, when you're ready, there's a lot of work going on that will involve your team members as participants in the phase 2A. We've set up a project charter. We have working group meetings underway. The general structure is to include CC Power staff with the project advisory subcommittee members, which is your staff. We then, of your staff, we appoint a chair and vice chair so that we have sort of special day-to-day representation, so to speak, from the CCAs directly working with staff as we navigate small decisions and manage this process. Then we also have sub-teams, which are listed below. I'll speak to that. The timelines is still a little uncertain. I think we are on track, though, to launch the solicitation in Q2. And so then, depending on how rigorous and how timely the analysis and shortlisting is, we might be looking to move into the phase 2B, if so proposed, towards the end of the year. And just so you get a feel for the work, the sub-teams we have, and this is starting to become a sort of complicated project. We have a solicitation and valuation oversight sub-team. So really looking at what we're soliciting for and making sure we know in advance how our valuation methodology is going to function. We're also bringing in or planning to bring in an owner's engineer and an oversight consultant. So that's going to help us understand from an engineering standpoint the viability of the ideas, the risk of the ideas, and key provisions like that to help us make smart decisions. We'll have the paperwork side for a build transfer agreement. When you run a solicitation, you want to signal to the market what the contracting might look like. That's what that's about. And then lastly, the bond finance oversight subteam is something we really think there's a lot of education that's going on. I know many of you have teams already looking at this. And so really helping everyone move up the learning curve on the bond finance strategy, considerations, structures, and team that you would bring to place, as well as getting to know some of the service providers in that space, such as bond counsel. So that's a bit of how the project's structured. And, just to give everybody a headache, we can go to the next slide. And, we have sort of, I know it's not at the most detailed level, but, through Philippe's project management, there's a pretty extensive Gantt chart with sub items, and we're piecing that together, and your teams will have a lot of say in that. And then, we'll be moving everyone along on this project schedule. And I know it's hard to read, but you can kind of see on the left column, there are many steps involved here. And so we wanted to get started right away. And that's why we've already kicked off this project and are forming the sub team. So with their help, we'll be able to start getting the project work done. So I'm happy to field any questions or discussions on this, but I wanted to just check in with everybody to let you know, fundamentally, this project is up and running. All of your teams are part of it. There's appropriate paths for feedback and conduiting information. And then each one of your teams, to the extent they're interested, has the opportunity to specialize a little bit and participate in some of the sub teams as well.
Any questions on this part of the report from the board? Director Marshall.
Thank you very much. Alex, do you have a list, or is it available to know who is serving on the various sub teams? I know that some members of our staff are on a couple of them, but it would be good to know sort of what the composition is across.
Absolutely. We have that information. I'm happy to provide, and I can provide it to anyone who's interested. What I may do is I may just send occasional updates to all the participants, and that would include some of that information, Director Marshall, if that works.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so then just next slide, please. Related to this, as you guys will surely understand, there's a whole language we need to be able to talk apples to apples with. And so we are spooling up a few optional education only trainings, including these bond finance 101s. Now, I know many of you, this is, perhaps too basic for your interest, but we have thought this would be helpful for level setting everyone on some of the language and terminology and approaches that go into bond financing. And this will also help us as a project team get on the same page. So these have been set up. We had one yesterday. There's another one this afternoon. And so anyone on your team is welcome to attend. And again, no board actions discussed these things. I'm just sharing that so you're aware as a GM report out. Okay. All right, I'll keep moving along then. So next was a report on the general manager activity. This is part of the reporting structures we've set up for contracts that get signed. And one contract has been signed in the January-February timeframe. It was a $5,000 contract for a consultant to produce a white paper on CCA software platforms. This is a part of the work plan that goes into our CCA ops work group, but then also this will help us strategize what near-term projects we want. It's also informing some of how we think about giving members access and what the proper IT technology would be. So the solicitation was sole source, and the budget category, when you get the financials, is legal and technical support. And of course, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions on any of the three parts? Director Hale.
Just wondering who the awardee was on the consultant white paper, please.
Yeah, it's a consultant formerly from Ava named Taj, who has a lot of expertise on the IT systems that get used. So that was who we chose to do this work. And the deliverable here is, a white paper that lays out strategic options for what works best for CCAs. and what a
Thank
role
you.
for CC Power could be.
Thank you.
Sure, good question.
Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll turn to the public. Is there any comments on the general manager's report?
Jeff, I do have one more slide.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem.
Didn't mean to preempt.
Yeah, so just one more slide really quickly is just a reminder of where we are in the work planning process for next year. Our next budget cycle starts July 1st. So we've gotten through a lot of January and now most of February with member interviews and needs assessments. If we haven't talked to you, we will. We're still scheduling these. These have been extremely beneficial though. So I just wanted to express my thanks to all of you for making time to help us understand what some of your near-term priorities are and what the role of CC Power might be. And then we take that information, we turn it into a more actionable work plan or an attack plan, and we'll start to socialize that so everybody gets a feel for it and can provide input. And then lastly, that translates into a finalized budget request for the upcoming budget year of 2024 to 2025. At this point, I don't think we're going to be pursuing any multi-year budgets, even though that has come up. So we still feel like we're settling into this process, and looking at things one step at a time is probably the right way. So thanks for the opportunity to update everyone. Of course, I'm happy to field any questions, although I know there's additional board agenda items to cover.
Anything from the board before I turn to the public? All right, let's go to the public now. Anyone wishing to speak, please use the raise hand function. And I'm not seeing any there either. That will conclude that item. And we'll move on to consideration of a resolution for delegations of authority, financial policy, and budget policy. And I just want to remind the board that this is flowing from what, a few meetings back. We asked for these policy updates from the general manager. And so this will hopefully clarify the general manager's general authority and ability to delegate and take reasonable actions, and some financial policies clarifying expenditure limits and reporting obligations, and then sort of formalizing the budget making process. I think I saw some timelines in here that I liked, and I liked clarifying what happens when no adopted budget is in place. And so I'll turn it over to you, General Manager.
Yeah, so thanks everybody again for the chance to share this for your consideration. What these policies are in some ways a step forward for CC Power to have slightly clearer operating guidance on the day-to-day management, reporting out, etc. And the way we've packaged them hopefully is rational and clear, and you'll see, and you have all these information pieces in your packet. I also wanted to just quickly thank our General Counsel, Brittany Isles, for meeting with me every week for a long time as we've had a chance to tune these. We've also been researching how some of you do your policies so that we could sort of match up and have a comparable structure here. To start, for this resolution 240201, we're bringing a batch of policies of delegations authority, financial policy, and budget policy. So we've grouped those together for your approval. We do think they go together in some ways, and or in a lot of ways. And this does also fit with the sort of direction we received to come back to you relatively soon this quarter with these policies. There will be additional policies, but we just wanted to focus on these and one other policy today. Just a really quick summary about these policies. The delegated authority policy clarifies the GM's authority underneath the board. So it's really clarifies a bit more how the board authority ends and how it gets handed off and down to the general manager, including on some of the personnel functions. So we detail that in the policy. On the financial policy, we wanted to share with everyone and lay out a plan for how spending authority is structured and what the report out requirements are with greater detail. And I'll talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, on the budget policy, as Chair Cyphers mentioned, just sort of giving more structure to what that process will look like and what we'll adhere to. There's also a new mechanism of budget controls embedded in that policy, and then some reporting requirements. So just at a high level, I do feel this provides a lot more structure for how we're supposed to operate and what clean operations looks like for you. And so I would recommend we support these policies. I did want to mention though, we got a little feedback on some of the policies. So let me request General Counsel Isles just speak really quickly to some of the feedback we received and what we propose to do about it, please, General Counsel.
Yeah, and if we could pull up the red line for this, I did want to show just what the few differences are than what are in the board packet. So if we could scroll down to the first red line there. So essentially what this does, it just incorporates a annual review process for all of the policies. Since the policies are the board's way of communicating to the general manager's authority, but also how the board wants CC Power to function, we did think that it was a good idea to have this be regularly up front of the board, in front of the board for a vote. So we kind of picked October as kind of more of a slower month for the board. We thought that was a good time to include that. And then if we could scroll down a little bit. So for this bullet in the case of emergency that gives the general manager authority to take reasonable action, as it's currently written, there's no definition of emergency or emergency situation. There was a thought that defining this too narrowly could potentially render this provision moot if there was an emergency situation that didn't directly match that definition. So as it's currently written, it is kind of left to the general manager's judgment to take action in an emergency. And we felt that with the requirement that the general manager report out at the next board meeting rather than as soon as convenient, kind of balanced that judgment call for the general manager. So those are the two red lines that we're now putting forward. So this is the version that is up for a vote today under the resolution. Happy to answer questions about those specifically, those red lines, or any of the policy.
I'll turn to the board. Looks like Director Balachandran.
I want to thank General Manager Morris for bringing this up. Yeah, I think providing CC Power the resources to act quickly is really important. And this was part of what we did in our strategic plan, is to make sure that, hey, we need to get all these procedures in place. So really appreciate you doing this. I think bringing it back to the board in October is a good idea, because we'll see how it works, right? And if it's not working, we have an annual review of policy. So my comment is, I think it's actually, though that's not what the resolution says, I'll just offer to the board that's a generic kind of recommendation. Let's bring all the policies that we've delegated authority to the general manager. Let's just bring that back to the board every October. Most likely, there are going to be very few changes, right, as we get better at doing this. But that way, I think from a board standpoint, we have the ability to exercise our oversight. At the same time, we provided delegation of authority so that the general manager can act effectively. So I'm going to vote in favor of this, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Let's hear from Director Marshall.
Thank you. I was actually wondering where the amendment came from, because, and now Director Balachandran, it helps me understand perhaps the thinking, because CC Powers is a new entity, but it seemed to me that the annual requirement for review of all of the policies, maybe not a bad thing, but to have to re-adopt them every year seemed a bit onerous to me. I'm not sure of any other CCAs that do that on an annual basis. And so I was just sort of wondering, you know, why, and maybe it's just because we are new. But my general thought was it felt a little onerous in that regard.
Would you like to respond?
Yeah. So we are actually going to do that at SVCE. As we grow, today we have 58 policies. We actually did a review of about 10 different CCAs about the policies they have. And we actually are going to reduce the number of policies that the board is going to oversee from 58 to somewhere in the 20s, and then create standards and procedures. So I think, Director Marshall, it is an evolution and a maturity thing. So I think the sooner we put it in, it's a self-correcting mechanism, and I fully expect the next time General Manager Morris brings it up, it'll likely be on consent, and he's just going to make some tweaks to it. But as we grow, we may have other policies that we don't need today.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm chuckling because we used to adopt a new policy every time there was a natural disaster until we hit policy number like 29 or something, and we realized we needed something a little more generic. So yes, I like your approach, Director Hale.
I'm thinking that the intention is to have the October requirement be a not less frequently than kind of a requirement. If the general manager needs us to make a change before the October, that would be welcome, correct?
That's the intent, as I understand it. Yeah. So we can make sure that's clear.
Yeah.
Any other input so far?
Motion to approve.
Oh, sorry. I'll turn to you next, Director Mitchell. Go ahead, Director Shaw.
Thanks, Jeff. To Barb's point, $100,000, it may be too low. Most counties now are at 200,000. That's where we are. So Alex, to the extent that it's an issue and prevents you from doing what you need to do to make sure the agency is successful, do bring that back. But don't, to Barb's point, don't wait a year if it's a problem.
Got it. Yeah, thank you, Director Shaw. Understood. And if I could just make one quick comment in light of this discussion, I just thank everybody. We're setting norms for this organization, and these policies will help shape that. I feel these are prudent at the time. I don't want to take too much time, but we're getting started, and we'll have a chance to course correct, as Chair Director Balachandran had indicated. So I feel pretty good about it on as far as the execution side will be workable.
Thank you. All right, Director Mitchell.
Oh, I was just going to motion to approve this.
Okay, thank you. I will check for public comment, but does somebody want to second that first before I do?
I'll second.
Okay, Silicon Valley. So let's turn to public comment and make sure we don't have any surprises from them. So anyone wishing to speak to this item? Not seeing hands. Okay, well, there's a motion and a second, so let's call the roll.
Okay, for resolution 240201, Ava Community Energy,
Yes.
Central Coast Community Energy,
Yes.
Clean Power SF,
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy,
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority,
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy,
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy,
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority,
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you all. So we've got one more voting item. And this is a resolution on CC Power new member policies. And I want to turn to General Manager Morris to begin.
Yeah, thank you again, everybody. I'm excited to share and present a little bit on this. And of course, I would like to thank those of you who participated in the ad hoc committee, thinking this through and helping, take those ideas and put them into this policy. So just as a quick background, CC Power is formed and governed by its JPA document. Enshrined in that document is the board's authority to accept new members with a 2/3 vote, and that is not being considered for change here. So that is still kind of the highest level rule for considering new members. What we're trying to achieve though with this policy is to give a little more process-oriented guidance from the board on how CC Power should respond and consider proposals or requests for new membership. So this is really on implementation guidance and process. And what it does in the policy is there's a process we lay out which stipulates that staff who receives any request can then bring that to the board. So there's a formal process where a recommendation is brought. We have the authority if it's needed to request that the board spools up an ad hoc committee so that we could kind of deep dive it with board members for a particular candidate. There's no special guidance at this time contemplating non-CCA public agencies, so we kind of left that blank. This is really just focused on process for considering new CCA members. And then we also, in line with the JPA document, wanted to lay out a fee for what new membership costs would be. And that fee, as proposed, is $50,000 plus a pro rata share of the annual budgeted costs for the applicable year of entry. And that would be really, in our language, the G&A costs. Part of what went into the considerations of this fee is, on one hand, you want it to be a modest barrier to entry so that people take this seriously, because we're going to be deploying resources to really think through if and formulate a recommendation on if the new member should be recommended in. And then also, many of you have been contributing through your G&A costs to CC Power Reserve Fund. So we wanted to make sure that any new member sort of put, roughly equivalent amount in. And so we felt like this was the right number for now. And again, we can always change this policy, but we thought this got us started and gave us a good rationale for how people could think about joining CC Power. Additionally, there's this idea, how are we prepared to evaluate some of the criteria for membership? One of those would be financial stability of a candidate CCA. And so we wanted to make sure to consider how we would check in with the CFOs of some of our member CCAs, because they're most familiar with what how the finances are structured and what an appropriate set of reserves might look like. So we have added that as an addition at the bottom. So with that, I think I've provided enough background, but I would go back to you, Director Cyphers, in case you wanted to, how you want to run discussion on this and see if there's any input.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely turn to the board, but I think one other possible rationale for this being as general as it is and not overly prescriptive is that I think we've all, well, I won't speak for anyone else. I think I've come to realize that some of the things that make a CCA more stable as a joint procurement partner are things that you can't put into a formula, like good politics, or like a really great working team, or like a really competent set of leadership. And I know those are things that rating agencies sometimes look at when they look at credit ratings, but it's very hard to nail that down into something that you can put into a policy. So I think if people are wondering sort of why is this general, I think it preserves this board's right to consider any manner of thing and take it into part of the consideration so that it's not too locked down. So I see General Counsel Isles has her hand up, please.
Yeah, I did just want to make sure, General Manager Morris, he did mention that we do have another red line to this as well, including that CFO language. So I wanted to make sure that we could pull that up just so the full board is aware of what is being voted on.
Yes, please.
And again, I'll just reiterate as part of the general manager's recommendation, the recommendation would look at the financial viability of the CCA, and then we included in the red line that would include consulting with the several member CFOs.
Thank you for that addition. So I'll check in with the board and see if there's any questions about this first and comments. Go ahead, Director Hale.
Just a quick question on what happens with the $50,000. Imagining that someone does this and they make a $50,000 payment, where is it going in the budget?
Yeah, great question. So it would go to the G&A side of the budget, which is not tracked at the member level. That's where we hold our reserve funds. And so that's kind of like where the safety net is housed for CC Power. As discussed also in the JPA document and in any project agreements, if parties do want to exit CC Power, we have some language on that would look at what their exit costs should be. And so in a way, we're also holding a little money through the reserve fund that may offset the need for any exit costs. General Counsel, did you want to elaborate on that budget provision, just in case I misstated anything?
No, that was good.
Okay. Director Hale, did I answer your question sufficiently? Okay, thank you.
All right, Director Sears.
Yeah, just a quick question, Alex. In sort of thinking this through, I mean, I'm struck by the fact that right now, except for Rob, we all represent PG&E service territory. I mean, there's nobody else from other parts of the state and other IOU territories that are part of CC Power. What kind of consideration, or was there any discussion or thought that went into this policy about how others outside of PG&E service territory might view these, and whether or not there might be creative impediments that we don't necessarily want to put in place?
Great question, Director Sears. We thought about if we should have more or less explicit criteria on the geography of any candidate CCAs. In the end, we felt it was not appropriate to pre-specify that, and that it would be better served that we could evaluate it on a case-by-case basis and then come to the board with a recommendation that the board would be informed to make a decision. I think on one hand, there's merits to geographic diversity, and then on the other hand, there's benefits to consolidated territory and everybody being close together. So we didn't really see that predefining that was an appropriate policy to put in place at this time.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Anyone else on this item? Okay, not seeing any. Let's turn to public comment on this resolution for new members. Not seeing public comment. So I'm looking for a motion. This is an approval item.
I'll motion to approve.
San Jose moves.
I'll second.
Was that Valley?
Yes.
Okay, Valley is a second. So let's call the roll.
Okay, for resolution 240202, Ava Community Energy.
Aye.
Central Coast Community Energy.
Yes.
Clean Power SF.
Yes.
Peninsula Clean Energy.
Yes.
Redwood Coast Energy Authority.
Yes.
San Jose Clean Energy.
Yes.
Silicon Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Sonoma Clean Power Authority.
Yes.
Valley Clean Energy.
Yes.
Thank you. The resolution passes.
Thank you. And I appreciate that there was a placeholder in the staff report that potentially non-CCA members could be considered in future policies, because I know our JPA speaks to that. Entities like municipal power providers or public water districts, water and power and so forth. So thanks for reminding us that that exists. So I think we're now turning to item 7, public comment on closed session items. And just a reminder, these are related to the general manager's performance evaluation. So does anybody have a comment on closed session before we move to closed session? And I do believe we'll have a report out today. So if the public wish, you can stick around for that, or can review the video later if you're not inclined to wait. So any public comment on closed session? Not seeing any. And then General Counsel, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I think we should ask the board to reconvene in the public link after going to the closed session link. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so stick around, and there is a separate link that you should have gotten yesterday from Amy Freeman in your email. And if you haven't, maybe let somebody know now so they can resend it to you. Has everybody got that closed session link?
And it was also resent, I think about 15 minutes prior to this meeting as well, from Amy Freeman.
Super. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody squealing, so we will see you in the closed session in 2 minutes, and be there or be square. Thanks, everyone. So this is Jeff Cyphers, Chair of Sonoma Clean Fire, but I'm observing we don't have a quorum right now. So what I will do is adjourn the meeting and have any reportable matters come to the next meeting. And so apologize for that. And after this, Brittany, I'll confer with you and just make a plan for the next meeting. Thank you.